Hey y'all, I'm Austin, and this is Sad Boys Anime. Welcome to the Nostalgia Corner, where I talk to y'all about anime from the 2000s era. Today we're going to be taking a look at Pandora Hearts. Let's get started. In the Nostalgia Corner, we have 4 categories: aesthetics, story, characters, and the influence from the studio, staff, / manga. We're going to talk about each one of these and how the show fits within those categories. At the very end, I'll be rating the show out of a possible 20 points, with 5 points from each category. First up, we're going to take a look at the story. At 24 episodes long, this anime is really easy to get into. Of course, to be able to talk about the story, the first thing we have to do is go over the plot. Pandora Hearts is one of those you kinda have to experience to fully grasp, because it's all in the vibes. But I'm gonna do my best. Let me know down in the comments how I do. So, the number one thing to remember about Pandora Hearts is the existence of chains. No, not those chains. These chains. Chains used to be human, but are transformed by the Abyss. The Abyss is basically an alternate dimension of hell, similar to Dante's 9 Circles. I mean, at least that's how I visualize it. There are different levels, some of them having stronger chains than others. Okay, so in order to escape from the Abyss, the chains have to make a contract with a human. Most of the contracts are illegal, which ends up with this clock appearing on the human's chest. These illegal contracts require that the chains eat other humans, and the one that contracted it has to do its bidding, basically. Every time the chain uses its powers, the time ticks down. When the clock turns a full circle, both the chain and the human are dragged off into the deepest layer of the Abyss. There are apparently legal ways of making a contract, but I don't know how that works. Something to do with trapping a seal on a mirror. I'm not even gonna try and pretend like I can explain it. Just know that's a thing. What else do you need to know? Okay, there's a group called Pandora, and they're the good guys. They are doing research on the Abyss. At the same time, there's a bad group, the Baskervilles, who are like the protectors of the Abyss. They're all similar to chains, but it doesn't work the same way. They're pretty much immortal. The story starts out with our main character, Oz, who's the heir to a royal family. When he turns 15, the Baskervilles interrupt his coming-of-age ceremony and send him deep into the Abyss. Inside the Abyss, time works differently than it does in the outside world. He makes a contract with a chain named Alice, or B-Rabbit, who wants to get her memories back. Oz and Alice have their memories linked up, and they both have no idea why it's like this. By the time they make the contract together and can escape, 10 years have passed in the real world. Pandora is there waiting for him to return, and they work with him to try and find Alice's memories, as well as figure out why Baskerville pushed Oz down into the Abyss in the first place. At its core, this story is about overcoming trauma and showing compassion for others. Everyone in this show has past trauma that they're clearly trying to either ignore or work through. At the same time, a lot of them don't seem to remember the trauma as well, and a part of the conflict is they've blocked it out and need to remember in order to further the plot. There are a lot of scenes where the characters are having flashbacks or reliving memories, but they're presented in a surreal way. Most of the time, the characters aren't sure if what they're seeing is real or not. This is definitely a way that extreme trauma can manifest itself in people who haven't confronted it yet. It's a really interesting way of taking this pretty basic story and turning it into something much more fulfilling. The story really draws you in and keeps your attention throughout. I rewatched it to write this script, and I sat down and didn't want to stop watching, even now, 11 years later. It's one of those stories that has just enough going on that there's a constant mystery that keeps you hooked, but it's not so complicated that it makes it unwatchable. These kinds of stories always are a lot of fun to me. It's so memorable, and it stands out compared to a lot of older shows from the same time. It's one of those shows that if you watched it as a younger viewer, it shaped your taste for other anime. The only thing I may take points off for is the lack of explanation for how the Abyss works. I feel like we could have used a little bit more lore behind where it came from and how it started. Overall, it's definitely a strong story. Remember, at the end, I'll be tallying up points for each category. Let's move on to the characters. For this video, I wanted to focus on our main group of characters. There are a bunch of side characters and villains if you take in all the Baskervilles and Chains, but we don't really see a lot of backstory on these, so I don't want to get into them too much. So, our main character Oz is immature, but a sweet boy with a big heart. He isn't good at being smart and keeping himself out of trouble, so he really needs the protection of his friends. This is where B-Rabbit, or Alice, comes in. She's a chain who made a contract with Oz so they could both escape the abyss. She seems to replace the usual dumb guy jock character. Is there a female version of a himbo? Oh my god, wait. Is that supposed to be a bimbo? No, I don't like that. She's a himbo. She's not a complete idiot, but she is loud and powerful, and definitely is the type to fight first and ask questions later. Since both of these two are dumbasses, of course, we need someone with intelligence to balance them out. This is where Gilbert comes in. He's the quiet, cold, calculated, strong dude with an undying loyalty to Oz. Because of the age differences, he's definitely the grumpy older brother of the group, taking care of two loud kids. He's a super sweet guy under that cold exterior, and really just wants to make sure the people he cares about are safe. The white-haired dude is a wild card who's clearly hiding his true power level and can definitely take care of himself. And the girl he's with is a smart person who is also in the know. They're both very mysterious at first and know about the inner workings of things way more than they let on, and you're not really sure if they're on the side of the main trio at first. They serve as the explainers for a lot of the setup of the story. I like the way this is done because they're not just explaining everything needlessly. There's always a reason for the explanation. Usually it's because Oz and Alice are confused and don't know how the abyss really operates. Gilbert spending all of those years with them while Oz and Alice were in the abyss just further drives home how much more mature and knowledgeable he is. The connection that all of the characters have really comes down to Oz at the center. Each one of them is tied to him, and in turn, they all end up becoming friends. They're all there to support one another and figure out the mysteries going on. Not only do the characters feel realistic and have a good connection with one another, they also fit aesthetically with their personalities. Oz and Alice look younger and softer, showing their immaturity, but Gilbert looks sharper and older, showing his knowledge and experience. It's never enough just to have interesting character designs though, so let's talk about the overall aesthetic for the entire show. All of my favorite shows lead back to a strong visual aesthetic. Not everyone feels this way, of course, but my favorites have always been stuff that's out there and different. You'll see that this is a common theme for a lot of my reviews. We love a good Alice in Wonderland aesthetic in this house. This show has a simple, sharp style, but it's still creative and exciting. Everything in this show is servicing the visuals. There are unique settings in the regular world. The rooms, the houses, the towns, it all works together to fit this old-timey England look. And it's done so well. It may not feel as lived in as a KyoAni show, for example, but it still sets up a feeling, and for me, it connects. I was watching D. Gray Man around the same time as rewatching Pandora Hearts, and it's a huge difference. I can barely remember how D. Gray Man looked, even though I just recently watched it. It's just not that memorable. You just kind of follow the characters from dark room to dark hallway to dark house to dark room again. It's very plain and mundane, and it made much more of a slow visual experience. In contrast to this, Pandora Hearts wants you to focus on the world they're in. The show is rooted in making you question what's going on, and visually it's aiding to that. One of my favorite parts of the show are the metaphysical landscapes, like the abyss. It's presented like a demented toy box. Even the flashback scenes are in this same format, with a general air of creepiness and mystery due to the visual aesthetics present. Even in the real world, they're able to stick to this. The Baskervilles are shrouded in darkness and mystery. The chains all have crazy designs. I think taking an influence from more than one different style is really what made this show's aesthetic stand out. The combination of Western and Eastern styles into an Alice in Wonderland-esque vibe worked phenomenally with the story. Okay, so let's go on to the last point. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, we're going to talk about the influence from the studio, the manga, the director, and how it was received when it came out. All that sort of stuff. So, first of all, it was published in Square Enix's monthly G Fantasy magazine. Until I started making these videos, I had no idea that this even existed. Move over, Shonen Jump. Monthly G Fantasy is my new best friend. Seriously though, this magazine has a lot of my favorites, so it's already up there on the list for me just because it's published in the same place as things like Soul Eater, Fullmetal Alchemist, and Toilet Bound Hanako-kun. This tells me that it already had the potential from the start, which is why it was picked up by them. This show is animated by Zebek, which honestly doesn't have that many shows that are good. In 2009, this didn't really matter because people didn't care about what studio things came from. So, if the studio doesn't have an influence, what does? Well, you want to know what else came out in spring of 2009? So, my theory is it kind of just got lost under those more popular shows. It was a lot harder to find anime back then. It wasn't nearly as accessible, and if you hadn't heard of it, there was a big chance that you wouldn't, unless by some miracle you managed to stumble across it. So, I guess that's one of the big takeaways from this section. There wasn't enough hype surrounding the show. Of the people who watched it, the audience seemed to really enjoy it, but there just weren't enough people for that. Alright, so it's time to total up all of our points. Here's how I broke it down for our first Nostalgia Corner episode. For the story, I gave a 4 out of 5. I really do enjoy this story, but for such a short show, the fact that I had to look up some plot points to be really able to explain it makes me dock it. The characters for me are going to be another 4 out of 5. There are a lot of characters for such a short show, and I feel like they could have done a bit more to flush out some of the characters, especially the Baskerville group. For the aesthetics, y'all know I'm gonna give it a full 5 points. This show is from 2009, and I hadn't seen it since then, but the world was still so cool, and the designs all flow together. The Alice in Wonderland aesthetic is one of my all-time favorite looks. Alright, and the last section. The influence gets a 3 out of 5. I'm sure you can tell I love this show, but I know that there just aren't enough people out there who know about it, or at least have watched it fully. If it had a more widespread audience, I know it could have had a much stronger fan base, and for that reason, I had to dock some points. So, how did Pandora Hearts do? Well, the math shows us a 16 out of 20, which is a 80%. I think this is a pretty fair assessment based on the factors we took a look at. I want to stress that I love the show and the manga is amazing. So if you like this concept and maybe can't get behind the old anime look, then do yourself a favor and check out the manga. I want to know what rating y'all would give this show. Have you seen Pandora Hearts? Do you have any nostalgic shows from your childhood? Do you want more of these videos? Let me know down in the comments. Remember that I post every Monday, so look forward to more content next week. Check out my Soul Eater review if you enjoyed this video. And as always, like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Happy Halloween.